All right, we have a lot to talk about today about the upcoming Bahrain conference and also the peace plan. But, I want to say something about a little bit of blowback that I got from talking about the election and abortion and how it was that I voted the Bible instead of for any particular party. And somebody indicated that we were, and when they say we, they are indicating evangelicals, are just following President Trump around and voting for him without looking at the issues. Well, the truth of the matter is, and it always has been, the issues remain the same. That does not separate me from being either a Democrat or a Republican or whatever the case may be. Virtually all politicians are going to promise you the sun, moon, and the stars, and you may get some of it or you may not. Most of the time you don't. But what is important is if a presidential candidate says that they will bring in conservative, Bible-believing Supreme Court justices who will work toward reversing Roe versus Wade, and also will bring in conservative lower court justices who will interpret the Constitution and our laws the way they were intended to be, then that's the presidential candidate I'm going to vote for. As I've said many times, I have to stand before God, and I will not stand before God a murderer. Of course, you've got those people who say, well, what about those who are raped or became pregnant through incest or some other vile reason? Well, the percentage of that is somewhere around 1.5% of the total 100%. And that equals out to be somewhere around 15,000 births. And right now, there are somewhere around 2 million people in the United States who are looking to adopt and would gladly take those 15,000 babies that would wait in line, probably pay your medical bills, and place that baby in a good home where it can be loved and cared for. But of course, the liberal left, they don't want to hear that. They want to key on the 1.5% for the sake of the 98.5% who are basically just having an abortion because they simply either didn't use protection or find that a baby is inconvenient for them. I know that's the harsh reality of it, but that's simply the way it is. But anytime you hear an argument about abortion, it's always that 1.5% that they bring up to justify the 98.5% who basically were just irresponsible. And it all boils down to one thing, and that is just sin. So I'm simply not going to justify voting for someone who's likely not going to change my life one way or the other when I know 100% that it's wrong for me to vote for somebody who's going to kill babies. All right, we're going to move on from that. I don't know if you know this or not, but here's some news for the Ezekiel 38 and 39 war. As you know, Turkey and Syria and Iran are now all in Syria on Israel's northern border. And Mr. Putin is hailing this partnership as a real success for controlling terrorism and maintaining stability in the region. But that's only one half of the equation when you're talking about the Gog and Magog war. The Bible also says that there will be a number of nations from Israel's south who will also be involved. And the bottom line is that Russia is also making inroads into that area as well. And here's a map that got leaked out that Stratford has listed on their website of all the nations in northern Africa that are working with and cooperating with Russia. Some of varying levels. As you can see, some of the nations that we know of are Libya, Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia. And these are some of the nations that the Bible says will take part in this war that I believe is going to take place fairly soon. All the players are either in place or are about ready to get in place and become participants in this major battle. Now moving on to another partner in this Gog and Magog war, which is Iran. Of course, you know that Iran has been sabotaging and bombing oil tankers over the last week or so, and tensions are beginning to mount between the United States and Iran. Now, it's not completely out of the question that they would go to war, especially since Iran now is saying that they will unveil measures reducing their commitment to a nuclear pact, which was the Obama plan that came out, I believe it was back in 2015. But they're going to start enriching uranium again, and I believe they said that they're going to bump it up 3 times more than what they were at. And of course, the Trump administration says they won't be able to do that, and that they would take measures. I don't know what kind of measures. They haven't ruled out war, but I don't know what's going to take place. The United States right now is relying upon sanctions. I've been reading a few articles coming out of Stratford that says that the sanctions are really hitting Iran extremely hard, and that's the reason why that these provocative actions are taking place. In fact, Stratford went so far as to say that Iran's banking system is on the verge of collapse, and they've needed to do some upgrades for a very, very long time, decades, and the sanctions are only speeding up this collapse that has been predicted for many years. In other words, it doesn't give Iran any chance to make needed changes because they've had to tighten their belt because of the U.S. sanctions upon Iran. But I do not expect the United States to go to war with Iran. It's not biblical at this point in time. I think that the next war that Iran will fight will be against Israel, where they will come down upon Israel with Turkey and Russia, along with some of these northern African nations that I spoke about earlier. But that's not to say that there may not be some type of skirmishes that might take place, either through proxy groups or even direct conflict, but I don't believe it will lead to all-out war. Now, before I go into the peace plan, here's a bit of news that I thought was quite interesting. It says that Netanyahu inaugurates new Golan community honoring Trump. And the new city, township, or whatever they call it, is called Trump Heights. So I thought that was quite interesting, and thought I would just bring that to you. Now going on to the peace proposal that the United States will be bringing. As many of you probably already know, the Trump administration will be meeting with international leaders and officials from around the world in Bahrain on June 25th. Now, one of the things that will be of issue, probably not this time around, but in the political side of this peace process, is how much of the West Bank will Israel retain, and how much will go to the Palestinians. And one of the areas of contention in the West Bank is how much of the Judea and Samaria will Israel obtain. Now, much of this will be, like I said, spoken of when the Israeli elections again are over, and they will end on September 17th, and then it'll probably be another 60 days or maybe even 30 days that Mr. Netanyahu or whoever it is that wins will form their government. And in talking with Jason Greenblatt, the U.S. representative for this Middle East peace plan, he's indicated that the political side of this peace plan will most likely be released after the Israeli elections and probably sometime in November. But he went on to say that he's not going to write that in stone because it still very well may be presented before that date. But as we all know, the Palestinians and the leadership have decided to boycott and to downplay and to push back against nations who are going to attend the economic side of the peace process. And one of the detractors of this peace proposal, of course, is the lead Palestinian negotiator, Saeb Erekat, who is really giving it to the Arab world and those who participate on the internet and on their website, and basically calling it a treasonous act. And he's also saying that the U.S. and others are just out to try to buy the Palestinians. In other words, they're either trying to throw a bribe at them. And here's a little bit what the article says. It says, we fully recognize that our economic plan cannot be successful without a political agreement, just as a political agreement would have little chance without an effective economic plan. So that's the reason why they're having both parts of this agreement. The elements of the conflict must be dealt with to unlock the incredible potential of the Palestinian and regional economy. And this is Mr. Greenblatt speaking. He says, perhaps Saeb knows he will never get the peace deal he has promised over the decades he has worked on this file. And rather than admit that, and instead of being willing to work to achieve a realistic, implementable deal, which can lead to great things for the Palestinians, he wants to give up before he even starts. Really, basically, it probably has more to do with him being out of a job than anything else. Or it very well could be that he's afraid of how the Palestinian and the Arab world would react. He could very well be assassinated. But going on, it says, how sad for the Palestinians. One thing I learned from my more than 22 years working for President Trump, it isn't a good idea to have people working on a deal who aren't excited, energized, and desirous of getting a deal done. A negative lawyer or negotiator can kill a great deal. Saeb also is making claims that the Arab countries who are attending the workshop have no right to negotiate for the Palestinians. On that point, we agree. No one is suggesting that anyone other than the Palestinians have such a right. Now, here's something that you probably need to pay attention to. But those attending sincerely want to help the Palestinians. Why is Saib manipulating their good intentions and pretending they are doing something nefarious? Those countries who are participating should be praised and thanked by Saib and the Palestinian Authority. Saib says that when Arab states exchange interests with Washington, they should pay from their pocket, not the Palestinians. Well, Saib, the Palestinian Authority hardly has any money because of all the waste, corruption, and the payments made to terrorists under your pay-to-slay program, whereby the Palestinian Authority rewards terrorists who kill Israelis. In other words, this is just another way that the Palestinians want a free handout. But the Arab world is tired of continuously, over decade after decade, giving out free handouts with absolutely no results. It's believed that the Arab world is now seeing that there's a possibility that this payment plan could end and that progress can be made, and there could very well be a workable plan in what Mr. Trump has got in forming a possible either two-state solution or whatever the plan may very well present. But for the most part, this is not Palestinian money. These people are coming to the table with their own money, laying it down. From what I hear, it's between $60 and $100 billion. But the Palestinians want that $60 to $100 billion. They want to be able to control it and to tell everyone who's donating this money how they want it spent. Or basically, if it's like it's been the last 50 years, how it's wasted. But going on, it says only by the generous grants and investments that may be made by others will this economic plan succeed. So, of course, they have a right to engage in this workshop, and they have a right to have opinions and set conditions. Here's what's important. It says it is their money, not the Palestinian Authorities, that will be used to achieve success, and those who will provide funds certainly have the right to be sure their funds are used wisely. Those who are inclined to invest in the vision are tired of endlessly donating money and want to put the Palestinians on solid economic footing. Don't mislead yourself, Saib. They do not want you to decide how to use their money without their input. Who would allow that anymore? Or after the decades of economic failure with vast amounts of aid spent. It is disheartening to see the supposed leaders of the Palestinians attack Palestinian entrepreneurs and Palestinian supporters in general for supporting a better future for their people. The Palestinians' leadership portrays participation in the workshop as treasonous. That is preposterous. Supporters of this workshop want only the best for the Palestinians and the region. For masked, armed gunmen to threaten Palestinians against support of a better future, as seen on official Fatah social media sites and in refugee camps, is despicable. Haven't those residing in the refugee camps suffered enough? If Saib, with his repeated talking points and distortion of our messaging, is honest, he must admit that he and others who say the same things over and over again haven't achieved peace, and Palestinians continue to fall further behind. President Trump is informed by previous attempts at peace, but not encumbered by them. He is seeking a realistic resolution and a brighter future for all those burdened with this conflict. The Trump administration has worked the issues of the conflict for over 2 years in earnest. We want to release the political plan when it has the best chance to help all involved reach a brighter future, when it has the strongest chance for success. We know there is no perfect time, and we won't pretend that the Israel elections might not have an impact on that timing. We won't pretend that reaching an agreement won't require compromises from both sides. And we won't pretend that anyone other than the parties themselves have the right to make the compromises to achieve a peace agreement. And he goes on to thank those who are coming to the Bahrain conference, and that those leaders are willing to say the status quo is not enough anymore. And to me it sounds like that the United States and also probably the modern Arab world are not necessarily going to unleash or reveal the political side until the Palestinians agree to come back. And frankly, it wouldn't shock me a bit if they went forward without the Palestinians. And that very well might be the direction that they go. But I think at some point in time that the Palestinians would have to come in and get on board. And they could end the article by saying, please don't allow those who prosper under the status quo to manipulate and deceive. In other words, that would be Saeb Erekat and also Mahmoud Abbas. And that's really what the whole thing is about. Those in leadership are prospering and getting rich on this conflict. And it also says, please don't allow them to squander the opportunity of a safer, prosperous, and brighter future for future generations. So, I'm almost wondering if, in fact, the Trump administration is willing to wait out the Palestinians. And it's very possible that the modern Arab world, they're willing to stand behind that. So there very well may be a period of time in which the Trump administration may try to outlast the Palestinians while the Arab world is pressuring the Palestinians to get on board. But we will be following this very closely to make sure that we don't miss anything. And of course, if you don't know the Lord, today is the day of salvation. 150,000 people will die today. The Bible says that the vast majority will end up in a burning hell. You simply don't want that to happen to you. So you need to repent, come back to the Lord, or come to the Lord for the first time and turn your life over to the Lord. And you Christians, you need a copy of my Tribulation Period Survival Guide. There's a free version and also there's a paid version. You can go down to the description section of this video and make the selection that you wish. But if I were you, I'd probably get the paperback version because you can physically hand that to your lost friend or loved one. When the rapture takes place, the tribulation period begins, they will find this book and have this book in their possession when they need it most. So I would encourage you to get and make your decision today. Well, this is Terry Malone with the Calvary Prophecy Report.